She walked into the luxury showroom with calm steps and curious eyes, unaware that within minutes she would be mocked, dismissed, and shown the door. No camera crews, no designer handbag, just a soft blue blouse, jeans, and a gentle smile. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy. She was simply curious about the sleek silver sports car rotating under the spotlight. But, in a place like this, curiosity wasn't welcome unless it came with diamonds and a black card. A salesman glanced up, then leaned toward his colleague. "She lost?" he whispered, probably just trying to take a selfie with the L series. The other chuckled. She approached politely, asking if someone could show her the specs on the coupe. The laughter wasn't loud, but it was cruel. "Ma'am, this showroom is for serious buyers. Perhaps try one of our used branches across town." She said nothing, just gave a small nod and turned to leave. What they didn't know, her husband, the man who owned half the transport infrastructure in the region, had just landed in a private jet, and he was minutes away from walking into the very building that had just kicked his wife out. And when he arrived, this wouldn't just be a showroom. It would be a stage for the biggest mistake they ever made. Her name was Layla Rahman, soft-spoken, observant, and someone who never sought attention, even though she could command it any time she chose. At 32, she lived a life of quiet grace, the kind of woman who smiled at the barista, read poetry on flights, and still called her childhood nanny on birthdays. She didn't wear wealth, but it was there, layered in everything she did. She had been married to Zayan Rahman for nearly 6 years. A logistics magnate and venture investor, Zayan had built an empire from nothing, and together they had chosen a life focused on impact, not appearance. That morning, Layla had dropped by the showroom on her way home from a community event. She wasn't on a mission to impress. She wasn't even planning to buy a car today. But Zayan had mentioned the new eco-performance line, and she thought it might be nice to surprise him by learning more. The moment she walked in, however, the air chilled. Staff looked her over with practiced judgment. She noticed the glances, the faint smirks, the absence of greetings. It didn't bother her, until she stepped toward the silver coupe and asked, "Is this the hybrid model?" A young salesman gave her a once-over and laughed. "That one's over $250,000. Might want to check out the compact range instead." She blinked. "I wasn't asking about the price." "Right," he said flatly. "Still, we don't usually open these models unless there's an appointment." Others in the showroom watched the exchange with quiet amusement. One guest even chuckled aloud, mistaking her calm demeanor for cluelessness. Layla smiled gently and nodded. "Thank you," she said, turning toward the exit. But she wasn't upset. She had seen this before. What they hadn't seen was the Gulfstream G700 descending at the nearby private terminal. And the man inside it? He wasn't just her husband. He was about to become the one name this showroom would never forget. Layla paused just outside the showroom doors. She stood beneath the vast glass facade, her reflection faint against the gleaming cars behind her. Inside, the laughter continued. A sales associate leaned toward his colleague. "She probably thought it was some kind of museum," he whispered. "Seriously," the other muttered. "Next time they'll be letting food delivery guys test drive the L series." Their voices weren't loud, but they weren't careful either. Layla heard every word. She pulled out her phone, calmly sent a text, and tucked it away. Not out of panic, not for retaliation, but simply out of principle. She turned around and walked quietly back to the front desk. "I'd like to speak with the floor manager, please," she said, voice gentle but firm. The receptionist, a woman with thick-rimmed glasses and a customer service smile, glanced at her cardigan, her sneakers, her plain leather bag, and replied, "He's in a meeting, and unless this is about a confirmed purchase, I'm afraid he's unavailable." "I see," Layla said. "Thank you." And just like that, she walked out again. Back inside, the sales staff carried on. Jokes, whispers, smug glances exchanged between luxury watch flicks and half-hearted customer tours. The silver hybrid coupe remained untouched, roped off like a prize too valuable to be questioned by people like her. But then, 10 minutes later, something happened that no one in the building could ignore. Two black SUVs pulled into the customer parking lot. Moments later, the regional director of the dealership, a man known for only visiting during board-level audits, walked in, followed by 3 security officers and 2 sharply dressed assistants. And behind them, Zayan Rahman, in an immaculate charcoal suit, no tie, dark sunglasses, and the calm expression of a man who knew exactly what he owned, and exactly what had just happened. Phones dropped. Salesmen straightened. The receptionist's smile turned from dismissive to frozen. The manager came sprinting from the back room. "Mr. Rahman, we weren't expecting—" "No, you weren't," Zayan interrupted, his voice smooth, low, and final. "But I was." He looked around the showroom, scanning the staff, the customers, the layout. Then he turned toward a young man near the coupe. "Did you speak to my wife earlier?" The color drained from the salesman's face. I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," Zayan said. "But you should have treated her with respect anyway." Every word struck like a quiet thunderclap. She came here alone, without cameras, without announcement. And instead of seeing a person, you saw what she wasn't wearing. The showroom went silent. "Let me be absolutely clear," Zayan continued. "This showroom will either reflect the values of the brand it claims to represent, or it will no longer represent mine." His voice never rose, but not a single person dared move. He turned slightly toward the regional director. "Start with a full review of every employee's interaction history. Any instance of discrimination or class-based treatment, I want it documented." Then back to the sales floor. "And as for my wife," he looked at them all now, "she doesn't need your permission to sit in a car. She could have bought the entire fleet in cash. She just wanted to ask a question." Layla re-entered the showroom moments later, this time through the main entrance, the same one she had walked out of just 20 minutes before. But everything was different now. The whispers had vanished, the smirks replaced by forced smiles. Salesmen who couldn't be bothered earlier now stood upright like soldiers at attention. Zayan turned to her with the kind of smile that never wavered, the kind that reminded everyone watching that she was not just his wife, she was his equal. "Welcome back," he said gently. "Shall we take a look at that coupe together?" Layla nodded with calm poise and walked with him past the row of frozen staff. One of the junior associates rushed to the velvet rope and removed it without a word. The silver hybrid coupe gleamed under the lights. It hadn't moved, but suddenly it was ready. Zayan opened the driver's side door for her. "I believe you had a question about this model?" She slid into the seat, graceful and unhurried, then looked up at the same salesman who had dismissed her earlier. "Yes," she said. "I was curious about the battery range and sustainability features, but it seems I wasn't important enough for that answer earlier." The man's face turned pale. He opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. Zayan stepped in, speaking not to him but to the room. "My wife and I are very particular about what we invest in. Whether it's a car, a school, or a business, we expect people to lead with character, not calculation." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the entire staff. "You can't measure someone's value by their shoes. You can't know a person's worth based on what brand is printed on their bag." He turned toward the regional director. "We'll proceed with the training overhaul as discussed, and that includes the lesson everyone here just received, in real time." Layla stepped out of the vehicle and looked at her husband. "It's a beautiful design," she said, "but I think I've lost interest." Zayan nodded. "Fair enough." And then he turned once more, but this time to the receptionist, the sales staff, and the guests who had said nothing when the jokes were made. "This showroom doesn't need louder music, brighter lights, or more luxury. It needs better judgment, and until that changes, we'll be purchasing our vehicles elsewhere." He offered his arm to Layla. She took it. They turned together and walked toward the exit, not storming out, not seeking applause, but simply leaving behind the kind of silence that no training manual could ever replicate. Because everyone in that showroom knew. They hadn't just insulted a potential customer. They had humiliated the only person in the building who had walked in with dignity, and walked out with more. Later that evening, Layla and Zayan sat on their terrace, the city skyline shimmering in the distance, the chaos of the day long behind them. Zayan poured her a cup of chai, his movements unhurried. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said softly. She shook her head. "You don't need to apologize for their smallness." He studied her expression, still composed, still calm, but quieter than usual. "I didn't walk in there for power," she said. "I walked in because I was curious. I wanted to learn something, and I was treated like I didn't deserve to ask." Zayn looked out over the horizon. "That's the part they'll never understand. You didn't need a luxury bag or a headline name. You walked in with curiosity and calm, and that's exactly why they felt the need to put you in your place." She sipped her tea, and all they did was put themselves in theirs. Back at the showroom, the tone had changed. The floor manager called an emergency meeting. The regional director distributed new customer protocol materials before leaving, and the staff, once proud of their exclusivity, now spoke in hushed tones about what it meant to actually serve, not judge. The silver coupe remained on the showroom floor, polished, perfect, untouched. But somehow it didn't shine quite the same, because the woman who had been mocked for not belonging had just reminded them all that true elegance doesn't need an invitation. Layla never posted about the incident. She didn't name the showroom. She didn't demand apologies, because she wasn't there to prove a point. She was there to ask a question, and how the world responded to that question became the real answer. Have you ever been treated unfairly because you didn't look like you belonged? Or maybe you watched someone underestimated, only for the truth to leave everyone stunned? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs to stay grounded in their worth. This story isn't about revenge. It's about perspective, about a woman who walked in quietly and reminded the world that real power isn't loud. It's confident, it's calm, and it doesn't need validation to be valuable. If this story moved you, subscribe, tap the bell icon, and stay with us for more. Because around here we don't just tell stories, we reveal the truth behind how people are treated and who they really are. Until next time, remember, never let someone's assumptions define your dignity, and never mistake simplicity for insignificance, because sometimes the person they laugh at today is the one they'll never forget tomorrow.